Welcome to an audiobook entitled Parish Management and Operations, The Buck Stops Here, narrated by Catholic author Michael Brinda. We hope you enjoy the segment and find it useful in your ministerial work.
Chapter 66, On Hiring the Best of the Worst. Let us first address any perceived inability to locate A players to hire. Number 1, there are always A players available to be hired, even if your budget is $0. In other words, we don't have any money, we can't afford to hire this person, is not a valid argument. Number 2, see number 1. However, what happens in such situations is that the pressure to hire somebody, anybody, builds every day, if not every hour of the day, depending upon the position that needs to be filled. Everyone in PMO is working extra hard, perhaps extra hours, perhaps performing duties they were never trained or hired to do, to keep the ship from sinking until a new person is hired. What happens next? There is in such situations a tendency, indeed a very strong urge, to hire the best of the worst, just to put a body in front of the problem and take the pressure off everyone else. Hire the best B player applicants if no A player applicant is available. Or hire the best C player applicants if no B player is available. Or take the best, you get the idea. And merrily down the PMO organizational performance scale we go. Remember, those who report to you are just seeking relief, and they will look to you to provide it. This internal pressure buildup is a quite understandable reason you might decide to hire somebody, anybody, to take the pressure off. Notice those who report to you are not necessarily thinking about the long-term damage done to the organization by hiring less than A players. Managing the long-term view is not their problem, it's your problem. They just want relief now. All the PMO administrator hears in his mind, if not literally in his ears, from current PMO personnel is, what do we want? Relief. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Relief. When do we want it? Now. So what does the PMO administrator do in such situations? Give up? Cave in? Hire a B, C, D, or F player? No. As difficult as it may be during this time, and believe me, I know it is difficult, never hire the best of the worst. You just don't do this. What do? You grind things out until you can attract and hire an A player. You do double duty. You work more hours. You pay bonuses. You pay overtime. You use a temporary employment agency. You find volunteers. Whatever must be done, you do. But you just do not hire the best of the worst. You do not inflict long-term PMO org chart damage to satisfy and solve a short-term hiring problem. To hire B players or lower over A players to solve a short-term hiring problem is a very poor choice, a bad deal. Make no excuses or exceptions. Do not do it. Chapter 67, The Art and Science of Hiring. Let us now discuss the two halves of hiring, the art of hiring and the science of hiring. Relatively little will be said here in regard to the science of hiring. Why? Because the science side of hiring is essentially rule-bound and formulaic. For instance, there is no argument that 2 plus 2 equals 4. There is nothing approaching subjectivity here. Just follow and apply the rules of math. Additionally, note another important point. If two different people learn 2 plus 2 equals 4 from two different teachers, the mathematical science not only demands, but also guarantees the student will come away with the same answer anywhere in the world, no matter who his or her teacher is. However, suppose the same two students are learning to paint the image of 2 plus 2 equals 4. This task has clearly entered into the realm of art, not science. Whereas the science teacher is working with a subject that is objective, constant, universal, and is striving to ensure the students arrive at the same answer as everyone else, anywhere else, the teacher of the artist has no such goal. Therefore, notice when teaching the science of any topic, you can separate the subject, in this case 2 plus 2 equals 4, from the teacher, and because the subject is science-based, a completely different teacher will still result in the student producing the same answer as from any other teacher. But can you see how the teacher of an art operates under different parameters? Therefore, when learning an art in contrast to science, your teacher's style changes not just how you learn, but what you learn. The very message itself varies. Some teachers might push you to paint more dryly, objectively, limiting you to only paint precisely what you see, while others may push you toward more Monet-like impressionism. This suggests, unlike science, an important distinction to any actions taken or words spoken under the rubric of learning, hiring, and firing as an art. Specifically, when learning the science of hiring and firing, the content of the subject is objective and constant. The goal of the hiring and firing policies is to ensure that any PMO administrator reaches the same understanding as everyone else, literally, when operating under the same employment and labor laws. The content of the subject and the actual PMO administrator are separable regarding the science aspect of hiring and firing. In other words, anyone who knows what they are talking about can tell you what forms must be completed by a new hire, explain employee benefits, health insurance, working hours, vacation policy, retirement plan, etc. But when learning the art of hiring and firing, the content of the subject, in other words, hiring and firing strategies, techniques, wisdom, etc., in this case, the PMO administrator in training and his or her teacher are not separable. Therefore, the teachers who teach the art of anything differ enough that choosing from whom you learn also determines, to a large extent, what you end up learning, if anything, about practicing the craft of the art under discussion. But to go even further, who really believes you can at all teach the fundamental essence of how to render in impressionistic style the image of a castle, forest, ship, sunset, or really anything? It is possible to discuss, to demonstrate by example, but at the end of the teacher is no more certain the student has mastered the art of impressionistic painting than on the day he or she started, except by demonstration. Grab your brushes and show me you can do it. To distinguish between the art and science of anything is paramount. If you have personally tried to convey something that would be considered the art of anything, you know this to be true. Your way of conveying different strategies, styles, details, experience, wisdom, essences, etc., is different from someone else. This point is not only important here, but equally important when it is your task to train someone who reports to you. What do you think will happen if you delegate such employee or volunteer training, or applicant interviewing? One must recognize when teaching adults that to simply drone on and on and on about the science of the topic is by and large doomed to fail with most adults in most situations. Likewise, in hiring, one must know the mechanical science of the processes, but also master the art of delivering the science in actual PMO work scenarios, such as asking an applicant to respond and then listening with a trained ear. With the above in mind, this brings us to our first art form to master. When interviewing applicants, how do applicants respond when giving a hiring interview scenario to solve? Well, the typical applicant has already overstated the volume or relevance of the prior work experience in his resume and is now in over his head during the interview. Is this typical overstatement of experience by the PMO applicant important to the interviewer during the job interview? No, not really, a point which may seem counterintuitive to you. And why isn't this issue important? Exaggerating and embellishing their prior experience in both nature and duration is what applicants do. It's like breathing. And why do applicants do this? Job seekers do what they are supposed to do: seek a job and be hired. There are no perceived interview rules for the applicant, save one: get yourself hired. As such, it is not incumbent upon the job seekers to void themselves by understanding and underselling their past, or to withdraw themselves from consideration for a job. Indeed, just the opposite is their goal: to build themselves up grandly such that they gain any job that they are seeking, even if they are not qualified. The fact you were fooled and hired a B player or less, that's not their problem. That's now your problem. Note the playing field is level during the interview process because both parties, the job seeker and the person conducting the interview, know the score. You are here as an applicant to convince me you are the most qualified candidate in the world, and I am here to discern if what you are and what you think you say you are is true. To discern correctly is where we apply the art of hiring. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the job interviewer to determine the true qualifications of any applicant. And how do you do that? As has been previously explained, that answer is in the realm of practicing an art, but the hiring science is the easier part and comes down to this. You must first know the right questions to ask the applicant before you conduct any interview. If you don't know the right questions to ask, Shazam! You will not gain the answers you need to determine if the applicant is technically proficient for your PMO needs. In other words, do they know the science, the how-to of the position they are seeking? Note, forming and asking the right technical performance interview questions for any positions is not the art of the interview process, as such technical questions just form the science portion of any interview. Make a list, work from memory, whatever you are comfortable with. The science of forming questions to ask on technical competency and proficiency is the easiest part of any interview process. You have all the time in the world before the interview begins to formulate or delegate, creating such a list of technical and skills-related questions. Therefore, speaking in general, given unlimited time, it is not difficult in advance to write a list of opening questions to ask a job applicant. But regarding the additional questions to ask during the dynamic and unpredictable give and take flow of an interview, how does one know the right follow-up questions to ask if one has never interviewed for that position before? Or for that matter, never interviewed anyone before, much less a search for A players only. And here's an even better question to ask yourself. How does one know the right questions to ask if one thinks they already know the right questions to ask and the associated answers, but are wrong? Oh, that could be a problem. Do you see now that any PMO administrator living life as the proverbial know-it-all is the administrator most prone to hire B, C, D, and F players? How so? Until you hire an A player, you are doing something wrong in your interview process. Do not doubt this point. Accept it and ask, now what? How am I supposed to hire an A player to fill this open position when I don't know what an A player for this position looks like? Answer: seek applicant interview help from someone you know that you know knows how to hire A players for the position you are attempting to fill. And who might that be? I don't know. But if the answer is nobody, you better not hire anybody until you either find interviewing help or personal coaching on how to do this. Your ability to master the art of interviewing only grows through gaining experience in the PMO interviewing trenches. But at your wise discretion, also supplemented by an advisor offering you A-player search interviewing assistance. Why would you or anyone want to learn the art of hiring by risking, when acting completely alone, making a hiring mistake? Have you thought through the consequences of making a single bad hire in such a small enterprise as PMO? What percentage of your total number of PMO employees constitutes even just one bad hire? You really cannot afford to absorb even one bad hire in such a relatively small operation. There is no shame in admitting you are not sure if you should make a job offer to an applicant until he or she interviews with someone else. This is often the wise choice and indeed standard practice at many employers, but still not a surefire guarantee of hiring success. And what is hiring success? Hiring an A player. The question is, who is your go-to someone else to assist you, and do they truly know any more about interviewing than you do? Most importantly, do they know the art of interviewing to detect an A player? How laughable and ridiculous it is to run applicants through a multi-person interview gauntlet, yet no one in the interview chain knows how to define what they are truly seeking, much less how to query for it. Thus, it is the applicant interview chain builder who is initially paramount to creating a successful A-player hiring process. If you are armed with the correct questions in the first place to interview for the PMO position you are trying to fill, and also recognize some of your questions are universal and some must be specific to each job description, where does the art portion of the hiring and interview process come into play? The art portion of the interview is interpreting the answers you receive to the questions you pose. To repeat, the art portion of the interview is in interpreting the answers you receive to the questions you pose. Notice how quickly you must make the transition from science to art during an interview. When you form and ask your question, that is the science part of the interview, the easier part, the premeditated part. But when you are listening to the applicant answer your question, in that instant you are now engaging in the art portion of the hiring process. Notice there is no announcement of this transition from science to art and art back to science. It is incumbent upon the person conducting the interview to realize and recognize, now is the time I must listen intently to the answers and analyze them. Answers to questions that have no preordained or predictable responses. The analysis of the applicant's answers in relation to the question asked and A-player profile is an art, not a science. You have no idea what a person might say in answer to your question, except you do know that you will now in an instant invoke the sum total of your accumulated knowledge and wisdom to date when listening to their answer. This reality forms the heart of the art of hiring. To listen to the answers given and make a judgment call. Yes, we do judge in this process as to whether or not the answers you receive make cohesive and holistic sense in relation to the question you asked in search of an A player. Does it pass your own personal smell test? In this manner, one can clearly see the more interviews you conduct and the more mistakes you learn from, the more A-player positional hiring wisdom you will accumulate. Your ability to align and correlate the answers to your questions with what your instincts, your nose, your gut, use whatever imagery works best for you, is telling you, that answer rings true to me, or that answer rings false to me. This feel for the answer to your question is the essential art of the A-player hiring and interview process. Yes, there are applicant testing software tools available to you for certain job categories and positions, but a quick cross-referencing look at the PMO org chart to available applicant tests will reveal that there really are no position types on our PMO org chart that will be helped by such applicant software testing tools. In PMO, we are a relatively simple but vital operation. Therefore, the art of asking job applicants the right questions is hard to do well. Why? Number one, time pressure. We do not have unlimited time during an interview. Number two, you must know what questions to ask that are specific to detecting A-player potential, not simply technical competence and proficiency questions. Number three, you must know how to interpret the answers you receive from any applicant for any position that reports to you on the org chart. This does not mean you can perform their job. It just means you know how to hire someone to perform their job. Note the distinction. Number four, you must be at a glance at ease and proficient with the speed you transition from science to art and from art back to science during the interview. Interviews are not linear, predictable, scripted events. Number five, the analysis of the applicant's answers in relation to the question asked is an art, not a science. There are few rules to follow in the art of interviewing, but significant application of accumulated gut wisdom. Number six, this process ends with you making a judgment call. Do the answers you receive make cohesive and holistic sense in relation to the questions asked? Does each answer pass your own personal smell test? Example, do you detect the claimed 10 years of job experience reflected in the answers given by the applicant, or 1 year's experience 10 times in a row? 7. One can clearly see the more interviews you conduct, the more positional hiring wisdom you will accumulate. Do not look for a more concrete, substantive, or scientific answer than provided above, because there is none in the art of hiring human beings. Those of you seeking to remain in the comfort zone of a hard and fast rule to detect A players, such as to be found in the more concrete nature of hiring science, in other words, fill out this form, you receive 2 weeks vacation, we provide the following health insurance options. You must stop looking for such hiring guidance, as no such guidance can or will be provided. To look for such guidance, much less demand it, is to potentially paralyze your hiring process. Success in hiring is both an art and a science, and if you do not master the art, while nobody is perfect in hiring an A player every time, you will mostly fail at hiring. As the saying goes, while even a blind sow finds an occasional acorn, solely relying on luck is not the way to practice superior PMO hiring. But there is much more to add on the topic of A players.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.